Hey guys, welcome back to Snake River Fly, fly tying tutorial. Great to see you guys after a long winter. We're back on the cruise here, and we're gonna mess around with some balanced leeches, balanced bugs, if you will. We're messing around with some new materials in our 0G line. Also gonna showcase some of our new hooks and whatnot. So if you're not familiar with the balanced leech, balanced leech is basically a 60-degree jig hook, okay? And what we've done is we're going to attach a needle or a pin out here with a bead head on it, and what that's going to do is instead of our fly riding vertical, it's going to create a level riding bug. Works really well, kind of a new trend that's working. We didn't invent it, but we definitely are stealing it. So we're going to mess around with a balanced crayfish. We have a lot of crayfish in our fishery here on the Snake. We get a lot of requests for people to see a crayfish, and what we're going to do is we're going to do a balanced one for you guys. It's not going to be a real articulated one. We're not going to put eyes and whiskers and legs and all that stuff. It's just going to be representative of a crayfish. So go ahead and get started here. Tying on the Renzetti Traveler. Once again, this is an old one, and we're going to start with one of our hooks that we've been sourcing for the last, I don't know, 8 months, and this is a 60-degree jig hook in a size 8. It is barbless, has a fantastic gap on it, really good strong hook, and we're really enjoying these hooks a lot. You can get these as well through the site. Looks something like that. 25 per pack. We have them all the way down to size 16. And so now what we're going to do is we're going to take a pin, okay? This is a real small diameter pin that has a big head on it. We sell these as well. I think $1.99 gets you 25 of them pretty cheap. And we're going to utilize that to extend our hook out the front and strap that on. So I'll show you how that looks. So I'm just going to start here with some Semperfli waxed 6/0 or waxed 6/0. We sell this on the site as well. If you guys haven't messed around with the wax thread from Semper, comes in fantastic colors. 240 yards on a spool, which is great. So let's go ahead and get started. Just going to start with my thread on that shank, on the straight part of the shank. Build a good thread base here for you. I'm using the Flora Orange just because that's a really good crayfishy color, and we do want a little hot spot on this by the time it's all said and done. And so now what we want to do is we want to prep our balance portion of this, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that needle or that pin, okay, and I'm going to put a brass bead on there, and I'm going to put a little cone head on there. That's going to give us kind of that end of a crayfish flare. The reason I'm using brass instead of tungsten here, typically we're using tungsten, is the cone's also going to add a bunch of weight. That's going to give you a really cool ramp to finish this fly off. If you let it go right down into the sediment on the bottom, give it a tug, it's going to kick up a little bit of dirt. So we carry these as well. The bead is a 4.0 brass bead, and the cone is a small brass cone. So I'm just going to lay this pin on top. I've already put the bead and the cone on there. I'm going to lay it out here, and what I want to do, I've already checked the length out on this thing before, and so I know kind of where I wanted to cut my pin, and basically hanging out about 1/4 of an inch or so to the end of that cone is where we've been tying these. You know, if you use a smaller bead or a bigger cone, etc., etc., you can adjust. And basically you want these things to balance, and you can test that at your bench before you go out. And we're just looking for these things to ride level. So I'm going to strap it down, bunch of thread wraps, kind of using my thread to cover up that end that I've cut. And I like to, you know, everyone that with these that we sell on the site, you know, we'll whip finish this portion off, and I'll just put a half a dozen good whips down the pin in front of the eye, and that'll tug in there and kind of fill in that gap make it a pretty tight connection. Can never have too many whip finishes like we've talked about, so we'll throw a few more in there. Now if you wanted to, you know, you could start tying at the back of the fly and move on, but I'll go ahead and prep this a little bit. Put a thread dam right behind that cone. Always build a good base. Tends to make a better bug when it's all said and done. If you're in a hurry, it's alright. I can do this stuff later. That's going to keep that cone and that bead kind of where I want it. Out front, out of the way while I'm tying the bug. Yeah, it's a lot of thread, I know, Larry, but that's why we have 240 yards on our spool. Okay. Now what I want to do is I'm going to go ahead and ask Brandon to hand me some liquid fusion. Or we're going to put a, you know, right here you could put a good head cement on there, but I want to talk just a little bit about the one that we really love using here in the shop. This bottle's been around for a while. You can see it's all cracked up. This is liquid fusion. We get it from Hairline. This stuff is a water-based epoxy. All right, so it's pretty thick as it comes out, but it's thinnable with water. So if you want to build up some heads, maybe do some epoxy style stuff with this, with a turner, you sure can. If you want to thin it out and make a real thin head cement, you sure can. And the cool thing about this stuff is it doesn't stink. It doesn't dry up like a lot of the other head cements do. We've had this bottle probably kicking around here for, you know, maybe a month, and we're halfway through it. We haven't added it on the site yet, but we do have it in the shop. And so I just put some of that on there, and I'm just going to kind of push it into the thread, and that way I've got a good adhesive base for all the different stuff that we're going to put on here. And what we're trying to do is we're just creating basically a balanced crayfish. We're not going to make one that's really articulated, like I said before. It is going to have some claws and maybe some antennas on it, but we're not going to get crazy and tie the eyes on there. So first thing I want to do on this, I'm going to tie my antenna. Excuse me. And what I'm going to use is one of our laser legs. This is in a crawdad claw. These are new as well. I think Brandon will probably have them on the site here pretty quick. And this is a fire tip. I think you get, what, 4 of these in here. Plenty of legs to last you quite a while, like so. And what I've done is I've just cut one side of these to give me one piece. And then I've taken and cut that one piece into 2 pieces. So I'm going to tie the tan end with the orange fire tips hanging out the back, like so. Right on top of the shank. And I like tying them in right where that pin ends. That will kind of smooth things out for you a little bit. Like so. And I can trim these to length when I'm done with the bug. So there's our antenna for our crayfish. And now what we're going to do is we're going to make a little dubbing loop with just a basic shepherd's hook. Whatever your favorite dubbing loop tool is, that's great. I like a shepherd's hook. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to make, you know, maybe a 3-4 inch loop in my thread. Come back in and put some wraps over the top of that. And then I'll push forward with this so I can get some wraps right behind it. And that completes my loop, if you will. And I want my head to go, oh, you know, about a 1/4 inch. It's just going to be some of this zero gravity dubbing. And so I'll just leave my thread right there. So now we're going to take our new Crawdaddy color of 0G. This is a 50-50 blend of real fine flash, synthetic, and painstakingly trimmed marabou. We've gotten rid of all the ugly parts of the marabou for you. The big fat stem, the caked on goofy parts, and the straggly little tips, and we've trimmed all this up and blended it painstakingly for you. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a small pinch and I'm going to slide it into my dubbing loop and push that up towards the hook. So we got that first little clump in there into our dubbing loop. We're running our fibers parallel, or excuse me, perpendicular to our loop. And if you want to, in order to slide these in here, I'll just keep it in my right hand that I'm holding the shepherd's hook with, and I'll pinch a small piece off, small clump, and then I'll loosen up just a touch in my dubbing loop here, just a little bit, and then I'll pull the dubbing loop open, and we'll slide that clump right up in there. Okay, you can get them perfect if you want, but it doesn't matter, it all comes out in the wash. I'm going to do just like 3 big clumps here, because all I want to do is create the width of the head here. Crayfish don't have their claws right at the end, they have them come out from behind the head. Okay, so I've got, maybe a 2.5, 3-inch noodle there. And now what we're going to do is we're going to twist this. And just twisting it clockwise, whatever, counterclockwise, as long as you go the same way every time, it's cool. And what that's doing is that's trapping all these marabou and these fine flash fibers in between the twisted thread. Alright, so now I like to, once we get it all in there, I'll just give it a little comb, kind of even stuff out. And what we're going to do is we're going to build a head right here from the antenna back about 1/4 inch. So I'm just going to start wrapping this around. Okay, all kind of in the same spot. Not palmering so much as I'm kind of stacking these wraps on top of each other. And what I'm doing is while I'm wrapping it around, I'm using my brush with my right hand, and I'm pushing these fibers out to the back so we get a nice little flow. Looks like the head of a little crawfish here. And I don't know, but we found that you can tie a great big 6-8 inch crawfish, and they're definitely out there, and I'm sure fish eat them, like some of the Nancy peas and stuff like that, and I've definitely caught fish on them. But we've found, at least in our fisheries, that they prefer eating the smaller ones. It makes sense. You don't want to bite down on a great big claw, choke on that thing. So we're tying this a little smaller on this size 8. So just securing that dubbing loop a couple times behind it, pulling it back a couple times in front of it. Then I'll just cut. There's a little bit left in here, it's still on my shepherd's hook. We'll just cut that off, and we'll use the shepherd's hook again in a minute in the body. And so now I'm just going to take some of these fibers, form that little triangle that's so essential in all fly tying. Pull all these fibers back and just secure them, get them all pointed in that same angle. So now I've kind of got a nice little head slash bump here, and I'll cut my antenna off now too, just to give myself some room, nice and even, a little bit longer than the shank of the hook. These are pretty light, these laser legs, they have cool colors, and they don't rot in the sun. So now what we're going to do is we're going to add the biggest characteristic of a crayfish, and we're going to add those claws. And I don't want these claws to be super articulated. We're not trying to imitate an exact crawdad pattern here. So our good friends over at Whiting have some fantastic Brahma. We've got a few of these in the shop. This particular one I think is, I don't know what color it is, March brown, so a little orangey. And you can see there's a lifetime of soft hackle in this deal. So I'm just going to take a couple of their feathers, pluck them off, just like so, and then I'm going to clean them. I'm just going to go about halfway down the shaft, and I'm just going to pinch that, and I'm going to pull it off. Right? I'm going to leave a little of the fuzz. I'm not worried about that. Anything that moves and breathes is going to be great. I've already prepped a couple of these, and so what I want to do is I'm going to turn my fly over on my Renzetti, and I want these claws to lay kind of flat like so. Okay, one on that side, one on this side. I've already prepped these feathers, and so I'll just hold this one right here at an X, kind of like you're tying in a rubber leg. And I'll do a loose wrap over that, on the bottom of the shank, which is really the top of the fly. Okay, so it's sticking out like so. And I don't want a really huge claw out there, so now that I've got a few wraps in there, I'll just pull in, get it about the length that I want, something like so. I've got another one prepped here, and do just the opposite. And I'll show you what this looks like. I'll turn the fly so you can look at it from a top view, like so. And I go ahead and make this the same length as the other one, kind of like so. And so now I'll flip this down. You can kind of see what we've done here. Kind of made some butterfly wings, if you will, out the back. Then I'll just put some securing wraps in here. Make sure that feather isn't going anywhere. Cut our stems off, like so. And then, you know, you could wait till the end of this pattern to make the claw, but, you know, if something screws up then, and I cut the claw wrong, then I got to start over. So I'm just going to come in with the tip of my scissor and cut the tip of the feather out. Makes kind of a natural claw. I think Dave Whitlock probably did this probably before I was born, but we're stealing it. Great little technique. All right, so now we're just going to finish this fly with another dubbing loop all the way to the back end. All right, and so I'll take my shepherd's hook again. This one I'm going to make a little longer dubbing loop, maybe 4 or 5 inches. Same thing, make the loop, come back, secure the loop, and then I'll advance my thread to the end of the fly. And once again, I take some of our 0G in Crawdaddy, got a pinch of it like so, and I'll take a small amount and slide it in between the 2 pieces of thread. You see a lot of people nowadays doing split thread, which would work fantastic. This material would be awesome in some split thread stuff, but my eyes aren't as good as they used to be, and splitting a thread's kind of a lot of work, so I do the old school dubbing loop. You don't need a turbo twister or anything like that. Just a hook will work fine. A little clump like so. Slide it in there. Another little clump. Excuse me. Another little clump of the 0G there. I'm just pulling a little bit out of this bag at a time. I mean, a little bit of 0G goes a long ways. This bag probably tied 20 of these things so far. Just another little pinch. Put it in there. So now we have a pretty good little noodle going on here, probably 3.5 inches. And once again, just going to twist that clockwise. Doesn't matter which way you twist it, as long as you keep twisting the same way. This is going to make the rest of the fly. When this thing gets wet, it slims out a little bit, but it still holds the shape. And so there's my noodle, my dubbing loop. I'll just kind of do a little touch up with a little wire brush, just cleaning up any tangles, anything like that. And now I'll start working it forward. First wrap right behind those claws that we tied in, those feathers that we tied in, those Brahma hen feathers. And the key here is when working with any of these dubbing loops, especially the longer fiber ones, is to get the material before you move on to that next wrap facing towards the back of the hook. Alright, so we got a bunch of these fibers facing forward, and I'll just kind of comb them back out of the way. It'll make for a lot nicer finished fly when you're done. Just making sure we're covering stuff. I'll run, looks like I'm going to run just a touch short here. No problem, I'll show you how we take care of that. So now we still have 1 inch or so left of our loop. I can untwist that. Counterclockwise, I guess. maybe. There we go. Just gonna untwist it, and now I can add a little bit more of our 0G in there. So you're not doomed if you run out. However, the loop's getting a little tighter. A little bit more out of the bag here. Little pinch. Stick it in there. Last little pinch. I was pulling down on the bottom piece of thread in the loop, kind of tugging down on it and stuffing it in between the two. Now I'll retwist that. 15-20 times is plenty. Comb everything out of the way. And now we'll just continue on what we were doing. A couple more wraps right up against that cone. You know, you wouldn't have to do this in a cone if you didn't want to, but Brandon, being the carp nerd he is, he's working on a great book talking about how that little puff of dirt, little puff of smoke, if you can get a fly to kind of kick that up, that'll really get their attention. So we put the cone in there, kind of look like the back end of one of these. Okay, there's the end of my loop. I'm right against my cone. Just do a wrap over the top. Trying not to tie down any of the fibers. 3 or 4 good wraps. I'm going to get a few wraps right in front of it. And that last loop in front of there, wrap in front of there, I still have my loop hooked to my shepherd's hook here. I put a bunch of wraps behind it, tying it down, and if you were in front to pinch it, I'll just cut that off. I'm ready for the next fly. Now I'll do a little combing with this thing. It's the beauty about all these soft fibers. You can kind of manipulate them. You know, top part of a crayfish is a little flatter. Bottom part has all the legs and the stuff out. So I'll do that. If you wanted to get elaborate on this thing, you know, you could probably put in, you know, some mono eyes right here would look really cool. Could have done that right before I, you know, continued on with the body. We're not worried about that, you know. We're just looking to represent that crayfish, right color, right shape, right place. Any of these weird ones hanging out the back, I'll just make my triangle with my fingers again. Pull all that back nice and clean. And get some good wraps right up against the cone. Provides a nice little hot spot too. Nice thing about doing the cone or a bead on these balanced leeches, if you're not real awesome at tying off bugs, having that bead out the front to wrap your whip finishes against, or that cone, really makes you feel like a whip finish pro. So put our whip finish in here and, you know, do 272 like Sven and I like doing. You know, enough of them to make sure it's not going anywhere. Tighten our thread. We'll cut that thread off of there. And this is how we fish them. You know, if you wanted to, you could clip some of this stuff on the top to make it a little, you know, more appealing to the angler versus the fish. But your claws are pretty simple. They're put out at an angle like that, so they are going to kick up. Give it a little bit of wobble as you fish this. But the cool thing about these balanced leeches, you're going to fish them on, you know, we fish them on a vertical rig, but you can fish them on a strike indicator and a standard leader. They're hanging down, they're hanging flat, all right? They're going to drop pretty quick, they're going to get down to where they need to, and they're going to show a big profile to the fish. And if you wanted to on this one, you tie a midge behind this guy. That's kind of what we're doing nowadays lately. But really cool concept, the balanced idea, and here's a balanced cray tied with some 0G on our new hook. So hope you guys enjoy the fly. Bottom side of it's pretty. The cool thing about this 0G stuff is when it gets wet, it just breathes, especially when it's hanging there horizontal in the column. You know, I'll take and thin a little bit of this liquid fusion down, and I'll cement my wraps and we'll call it good. But I usually will do that after I tie a dozen or so. So anyway, there you go. Balanced cray, 0G, whatever, crawdad. Rad little bug, catching fish right now, fishing really well for us. So hope you all have fun with it and get yourself some 0G. Thanks a bunch.